I want to start by just letting everybody in the room here know how much is going on in Western Pennsylvania. Everyone knows we have the highest percentage of veterans per capita of any place in the country. And this has been going on for a long time. It's not something that's new. And out of that has come, for example, Roger Brooks, Department of Psychology here at Duquesne, that does pro bono work for veterans that may not be getting the kind of services that they need in the VA. And I've had some of my Vietnam veterans use Roger's services. The Human Engineering Research Lab that's over in Bakery Square, led by Rory Cooper. They're doing all kinds of things with wheelchairs and prosthetic arms and hands and you name it. They're doing things like that. We have the Center for Military Medicine Research, and that's led by Ron Poropatic. I hope he's still here. Is he gone now? So the Center for Military Medicine Research, and Ron was a retired colonel that came to Pittsburgh and is sort of putting his arms around all the many things that we do here in Pittsburgh. We have the McGowan Center for Regenerative Medicine, and they're actually creating organs over there. They'll take a lattice of someone that might have their esophagus removed, they'll put stem cells in there, and they'll grow a new esophagus that they can actually put into another person. I know you've heard of things like that. We have the Armed Forces Institute of Regenerative Medicine that's right here in Pittsburgh. In addition to that, you've heard about VLP and VLP's history of the work that it's been doing for a long period of time. There's Father Mike here, and Father Mike has the Shepherd's Heart that deals with homeless people. I mean, when you go to see Pastor Mike's place, you really see people there that really, really need help. And, Pastor Mike is like a saint. I don't know whether you know that we have veterans courts here in Pittsburgh, and the only way that you would know how good a veterans court is serving our area is if you're helping a Marine in Salt Lake City, Utah, where there's no veterans court. And they're just treating that Marine like anybody else. They're not taking into consideration that he's had 4 deployments, that he's come back and his wife has had an affair with someone else, and he gets in a fight with someone and he's arrested and he goes into the court system when he really, really needs a veterans court. And if you've ever been to a veterans court graduation and seen the veterans that are graduating from Pittsburgh's Veterans Court, what you'll see is all the surrounding counties now around Allegheny County have veterans courts. So Pittsburgh is like one of these beacons of having veterans courts here. All you have to do is to go down on the North Shore, see the Fred Rogers Memorial, the Policeman's Memorial, the Korean War Memorial, the Vietnam Memorial, and the newly dedicated World War II Memorial, all in one place. All these kinds of things point to Pittsburgh and what's happened here in Pittsburgh. Well, for a lot of you people that have been to these breakfasts before, I know you remember Major General Tom Jones when he came in here and he really gave us an inspiring talk. Well, 8+ years ago, he happened to be on the board of the Semper Fi Fund, which is a fund that 2 women who lost husbands and children in OIF went out and raised $50 million, and from that, they created the Semper Fi Fund. And the Semper Fi Fund, in terms of a 501(c), is just doing outstanding work. Well, one of the things that General Jones did, because he has a 400-acre camp here in Western Pennsylvania, he decided to create Semper Fi Odyssey. The name of his camp is Outdoor Odyssey, and the Semper Fi Fund funds all the Marines and sailors and now soldiers that are getting ready to be medically retired from their branch of the service for a 1-week intensive transition program. Happily for me, I knew Tom going way back, and I got involved up there 8 years ago. And so I've done 40 of these weeks now with Marines, soldiers, and sailors that are coming back who have had an average of 4.5 deployments. One of the men in my team actually had 9 deployments since the war started. Had 3 children, and you can only imagine starting out as not even an NCO, now he's a first sergeant. His whole career has been nothing but war. Obviously, he had a lot of problems, and interestingly, he was an EOD tech. He had over 480 IDE experiences, and he got blown up on his last one, guess what? Saving his dog. This is the kind of people that we've been working with here in Western Pennsylvania. The Marines have a Wounded Warrior Battalion at Camp Pendleton. They have one down at Camp Lejeune. Marines come from Hawaii, 29 Palms. They come from San Antonio. They come from Walter Reed, and obviously Camp Pendleton. So I've had this chance to be with these guys from 7:30 in the morning till 7:30 at night, and I can tell when I get my next 4 people, I can really look at them, and it doesn't take me very long, not only to form a bond because I've walked in their shoes, but I can look at them, and I can really begin to see what they're suffering from. Now, as the war began, we had more gunshot wounds, we had more shrapnel, we had more burns, we had things like that. But as this thing has gone on for 14 years, now we're getting more people with traumatic brain injuries because of all the IEDs. And because of the length of the war and all the deployments that they've had and the loss of resiliency that our soldiers and Marines and sailors have, there's more stress, post-traumatic stress or chronic stress or the traumatic stress of when they've had really major incidents in their life. Well, when the Center for Military Medicine was created, I didn't know it at the time, but they wanted me to speak about Semper Fi Odyssey to some of the executive directors of the organizations that I just talked to you about. And when I did that, the executive directors, knowing now that Semper Fi Odyssey was here, with a lot of Marine soldiers and sailors that had traumatic brain injuries, they had a DoD grant to study traumatic brain injury right here in Pittsburgh. And they're the only high-definition fiber-tracking MRI in the world that lets us look at the brain at the fiber level. And interestingly enough, they then asked me to become the military coordinator and coach. So I'm taking my experience with Semper Fi Odyssey, and they plugged me in over here because I can then coordinate bringing Marines and soldiers and sailors into this program that really have medically diagnosed traumatic brain injuries. Well, the difference between Team TBI and others is that almost every participant there has what the colonel just talked about, not only a TBI, but they've got post-traumatic stress or post-traumatic stress disorder. And we no longer think of a TBI or post-traumatic stress as a single injury. That's the way it was thought of in the past. The slides that the colonel showed up there with different parts of the brain color-coded means that this traumatic brain injury and PTSD can present itself in a multitude of ways. And the team has a whole bunch of PhDs and MDs that intensively, over 4 days, figure out how that traumatic brain injury is actually presenting itself. And they've developed what we call trajectories. And those trajectories are sleep, memory, attention, cognition. They break cognition into 3 pieces. Those 3 pieces are short and long-term memory, processing speed, and what we call executive functioning or working memory capacity. Being able to juggle 3 or 4 things and having to remember bits and pieces of something that you're trying to do. Then there's pain, migraine, anxiety and depression, ocular motor that has to do with vision, vestibular that has to do with balance, exertion that has to do with nausea, and then finally, one that all of them have is hypervigilance. Now, I know I went over those real quickly, and I did that on purpose, to go over those real quickly. But here's the reason that this Veterans Day breakfast was themed Life-Changing Service Dogs for Veterans. Because the issue of suicide has to do with a person that's impacted by 4 or 5 of those 12 or 6 of those 12 or whatever it is, impacted by that in such a way that he makes a decision, whether that decision is really well thought of or whether that person's doing it drunk or whatever the case may be. They're making a decision that they can't solve those problems. And of course, we've got a legion of therapists that try to help, and we all know that the VA has a tsunami right now of veterans that are coming back with issues. There's no way that the VA can handle everything that's going on. So with Team TBI, we call it Team Science, because you cannot really understand fully a TBI or a post-traumatic stress disorder unless you know these trajectories and how they present. Now, when I talked about sleep, sleep is draped over everything. If a veteran is not sleeping well, then the brain isn't going to heal, because it's during sleep that the brain cleanses itself and heals. At Semper Fi Odyssey, when I ask all the guys there, who in here is having sleep problems, every hand goes up. Every single hand goes up. So everybody that's coming through Team TBI and everybody that's coming through Semper Fi Odyssey has a sleep problem. Now let's plug a service dog into that. A well-trained service dog, like Tom's service dog down here, or the many service dogs that come with the Marines and soldiers and sailors that come to Semper Fi Odyssey. That service dog goes to sleep with that veteran. He's on the bed or he's by the bed. And if that veteran starts to have a nightmare, that service dog is up, waking that guy up, licking his face or whatever the case may be. So the service dog now, like a therapist, enables that person that's had a traumatic brain injury or post-traumatic stress disorder to sleep. Now, almost every veteran or every active duty Marine that comes to Semper Fi Odyssey has difficulty paying attention. They just can't focus for long periods of time because they're getting pecked away with different things. And obviously, if you can't pay attention, you've got memory issues. They go hand in glove. Well, the service dog, whenever it senses that person having difficulty paying attention, it may put its foot on its lap, or it may put its head on its lap, or it takes that veteran's then able to go down to the dog and forget about things around him at the moment and focus. And once that happens, we talk at Semper Fi Odyssey, everybody wants to get a veteran a job, but not every veteran's ready for a job. If they can't pay attention, if they have memory problems, if they're not sleeping at night, if they're having problems with alcohol, they're not ready for a job. So now we've done sleep, memory, attention, cognition, obviously. If that dog is there, that person cognitively is going to become more aware. And think about pain and migraine. How does the dog minimize pain and migraine? It actually senses when that person that it's linked to is having pain. Think of anxiety and depression. I watched one of our, by the way, this is Kate Edelman right here. She kind of runs Team TBI for us. But I watched one of our Team TBI participants when Dr. David Okonkwo was pulling together all the trajectories that person was presenting with that over that 4 days we figured out, and he was asking him questions. I could see the Marine getting anxious. Well, the dog just started to sense that anger, and the dog was trying to get him out of the room and everything like that. David and I looked at that dog and we just shook our head. Sometimes when we have somebody going through Team TBI and we come up with all their trajectories, I raise my hand and say, get her a dog. So we now talk about the ocular motor issues and vision. We talk about balance. I've seen people that have balance issues, vestibular issues, and the dog will kind of move up beside the person when it sees the person having a little bit of balance issue. Now, this relationship between the dog and the person, that bond is stronger. Somebody made a joke and said, do you think your dog loves you most or your wife? And they said, well, put your wife in the trunk of the car and put the dog in the trunk of the car, come back 6 hours later and see which one still loves you. So the relationship between the soldier, the sailor, and the Marine and the dog is really palpable. When I talked to you about Eric Chur that had 9 deployments, and he gets blown up on his last one after 450 IED experiences, and he's saving his dog. Think of that relationship that's there. And then finally, hypervigilance. And I know Tom, when he comes up and talks about this, hypervigilance, every person that's been in combat is on high alert. The sympathetic nervous system is high alert. The parasympathetic nervous system that ought to be bringing this down just isn't keyed up. Even today, when I come through my garage, I have this little dark spot over there. I always look around before I take a step. I do. I just look around to make sure everything's okay. I'm still somewhat hypervigilant about things like that. Well, I'll tell you, the dog cures hypervigilance because the person has the dog with them. So, what's all this mean? I've told you all the things that go on in Western Pennsylvania that we have going on here. We've really done great. None of this would have happened if we didn't have years and years and years of veterans doing little things that add up. So when we were thinking about our Veterans Day breakfast, how are we going to theme it? Well, obviously, Tony, I'm not sure where he is right now. Tony has always loved dogs. Tony's been up at Semper Fi Odyssey. A lot of other guys in here have been up at Semper Fi Odyssey also. Tony says, well, if we're really going to do something about 22 veterans every day, and to give you a little bit of an example, maybe some of you read the New York Times article about the 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines. Over the past 3 years, there's been 13 suicides in one battalion of the United States Marine Corps. Now, we that work with those guys all the time, we can see it, we can understand it. Sometimes it's a logical choice from their frame of reference, where they're at. So that's how this got themed, life-saving service dogs for veterans, because we want to plant a seed here in Pittsburgh that might grow to other cities. Imagine if we meet our goal of getting 22 service dogs. That's the amount of money that we're trying to raise. 22 service dogs. Now, obviously, we got to find the guys that are danger close. We use the words danger close. At Simplify Odyssey, by the end of the week, we can tell there's 2 or 3 there are danger close. Danger close means that they could end their lives. Those are the guys that we want to find, and we want to get a service dog with them. So everything we've done has a reason, a purpose, our mission. What do we want to do? Why do we want to do it? We want to impact danger close guys that have paid the price way more than any. We've got another greatest generation coming up here in the OIF, OEF guys. And that's why Tony and the guys that he's put around him have themed this life-saving service dogs for veterans.